aspect of reflective parenting comes back to what I told you about the focus of much of my research at the University of Minnesota and work I've done for many, many years with parents and babies. And that is around reflecting on how we were raised, how we were parented, and what we learned in those early relationships. Now, I'm sure anyone in this room could tell stories about the things that you learned and that sometimes, whether they're good or not so good, show up in your behavior. And if they're not so good, maybe they show up particularly at times of high stress. That's my story. Because I've got a lot of education, formal education in child development and parenting. You know, I know quite a bit about how to deal with kids. But my first lessons in how to parent were learned from my parents, who were teenagers. My dad dropped out of school after the 9th grade. They had, you know, a lot of stresses in their lives, more than I could even count, especially when I was very young. And my father, in particular, my mom was a very nurturing, tender mom, but my dad was very explosive and unpredictable. He was a fun guy, an entertaining guy. He did a lot of things well and gave a lot to me in my development. But he was very unpredictable, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells much of my childhood. And so I was in a heightened state of arousal much of the time, you know, kind of fearing that I was going to do something that would trigger that rage. Now that's still in me. Even though I've had some good therapy, I've had supportive friends, I've been married to the same man for almost 48 years and good supportive relationship, but that's still a part of what I learned, and that was the first lesson. And it's the lesson that crops up at the hardest times. So I will hear my mother's voice coming out of my mouth. I will feel myself wanting to control everything and getting so intense and rageful. Now, I rarely let the real rage out. My family might think otherwise, but wait, you should see the real rage. But that's something that is still with me. I'm in my 70s now, and that's still there. And so what I've been so excited about in the research on reflective parenting is that it is not so much how we were parented that writes the script for us as we parent our children, but it is how we've come to think about it. We can't change how any of us were parented. And some of you may not want to change it. But I would have loved to change some things in my childhood experience, and that isn't going to happen. But how I've come to understand it, how I've come to think about what that felt like to me, and how I've been able, with a lot of good support, some of it professional support, how I've come to think about what I want to repeat with my children and now my grandchildren, and what I want to leave behind. That sounds so simple, but it's a hard thing to do. You know, there are lots of different things that we might have in our history. And so looking back on that and really coming to grips with it and thinking, what do we want to carry forward? What do we want to leave behind? I want to leave my dad's explosiveness behind, but I want to carry forward his belief that I could be the first person in my family to go beyond high school, to go to college. So thinking about both the good and the bad, whatever our experience was. And the beauty of the research is that thinking about, and then mustering all the resources we can get a hold of to help us live out that choice. What are we going to carry forward? That's what really makes the difference, because we don't have to let anyone write the script for us. We don't have to let our past write